Well, hello again, everybody, and welcome back to Notes from the Pastor Cave. And we're going to do something maybe, I don't know if you call it really different or not, but we're going to skip ahead just a little bit. And we've been in chapter 20 and 21 of Exodus. And there's just so much here. And what's happening is that God is laying down the laws. He's the lawgiver, so He's laying down the laws and for the nation of Israel, not only for them to begin to abide by those laws in their now, but also in their future when they finally get to Canaan. When they finally get to the place that God is bringing them to. And so there's a lot of detail there, and there's a lot of particulars, but I don't don't have any particular notes on a lot of that, as they are really kind of they really kind of roll into the world of the practical. How do I deal with my neighbor? How do I deal with my neighbor's stuff, right? What do I do when my neighbor's ox wanders onto my property and he's unaware of it? Things like that that are very much the everyday that don't necessarily need to be commented on. But a couple of things, kind of big picture things that I do want to mention here. And I mentioned this last time, but these laws could be used as a groundwork really anywhere at any time. So, if for some reason you found yourself on a desert island with a group of people and, you needed to form a new society of some kind, or if you're someplace that needed to create a new nation, for instance, you could take these laws and you could lay them as a groundwork for what you were doing, and you would create a very excellent society. And the other thing that I want to bring up just very quickly is that one of the things, and again, international audience, but one of these things that we tend to do too much of, way too much of here in North America, is that we talk about the will of God, but we talk about the will of God very much individually speaking. In other words, what is God's will for me? What is God's will for Charlie over here? What is God's will for this couple, my marriage? Those kinds of things. But what we have here in the Ten Commandments and in the laws that are given afterwards, the particular laws, is an expression of God's will for a group. Okay, well, traffic noises today. And this really cannot be stressed too much. That very often we are guilty of taking scriptures that are meant for the group. They're meant for God's people as a whole, and we apply them individually. And, we do it sincerely, but sometimes we get it sincerely wrong when we do that, because God most often really expresses His will to the group, the community, more than He does the individual. We take those moments in time, like God speaking to Gideon and God speaking to Moses, and we magnify them, which is it's great. I mean, it's God's word, and there's great stuff to be learned from there. But we tend to devalue the times in which God speaks to the entire group or the entire community or to the entire nation. And when God is laying down these laws, He's not speaking to the individual. He is speaking to the group. He's talking to a people who are the Israelites now and will in a few years establish the kingdom of Israel. And all this groundwork will become very important, but it is for God to express His laws is for God to express His will. They are one and the same. So we always have to be aware of that when we're reading God's word. We have to say to ourselves: Is this God is God expressing His will to the group, or is God expressing His will to the individual? Because sometimes that can be very important. So, all that being said, I'm going to skip over to chapter 23, about midway through. And so 23 verse 14 says this. It says, here again, this is God speaking. 3 times in the year you shall keep a feast to me. As I've said many times, God is a party God. He really likes His people to have feasts and parties and all kinds of celebrations. So 3 times a year, at the very least 3 times a year, you're going to have a big celebration. And you're going to have a big feast with it. And you shall keep the feast of unleavened bread, as I commanded you. You shall eat unleavened bread for 7 days at the appointed time in the month of Abib. For in it you came out of Egypt. And then there's this sentence. None shall appear before me empty-handed. None shall appear before me empty-handed. Now, let's face it, all of us understand that in life there are good times and there are bad times. And there are times of plenty, there are times of enough, there are times of provision, and there are also times that are really, really lean. And there are all of God's promises to take care of us. But there are definitely lean times, and I could go on for several videos about the lean times that Mrs. Pastor Cave and I have lived through over the years. But there's an important point to be made here, because in any group of people, okay, so here's God speaking to the group, and He's saying, don't ever appear to me empty-handed. In other words, the context here is the unleavened bread. Don't appear to me without this gift. Okay. And you think to yourself, well, that seems kind of harsh, doesn't it? Because wouldn't there be times, and as I said, in any civilization, in any culture, any group of people, any church, there are always people's fortunes rising and falling. Somebody's doing better, somebody's not doing as well. You never, I've pastored for over 30 years. You never have a time where everybody in your church is doing well. It just doesn't happen, okay? So it seems kind of demanding that God would say, look, when you show up to these feasts, don't show up to me empty-handed, okay? Well, Lord, what if I'm not, what if I'm not doing well? What if these are hard times and I don't have any bread to bring? I don't have anything to bring before the Lord because I'm not doing well. And the answer to that is one. We don't like to hear this in North America. The answer to that is community. Okay, the answer to that is community, because it is absolutely true that in every community of people you have some that are rising and some that are falling, as far as, wow, big truck day out there. Some that are rising and some that are falling, some that are doing better, some that are not doing well at all. It becomes important for the community to look after each other. And unfortunately, in North America, we have created this culture of rugged individualist Christianity, which was never supposed to happen, and it was never supposed to be. We've created an atmosphere where people can, Sunday morning, shuffle into church, and raise their hands and worship a little bit, and you hear the preaching, and say hi to a couple of people on the way out, and then shuffle back out again, and never have to have real contact, never have to have real community with the people in their own church. This guy over here, he joined, he's a member of the church. This guy over here, he joined, but they never have anything to do with each other outside of church. And this is not the community that God envisioned, because, and in part, all right, if these two guys are members of the church, but they're not really aware of each other outside of church, they don't know when the one guy might need bread from the other guy. Okay? And this is really how it's supposed to work. That God knows that people will do better sometimes, and that people will not do better at other times, even those who are right smack dab in the middle of God's will. But there is a need for community, so that Charlie can step in and say, "Hey, Bill, I know you don't have much bread right now, and so can we share some of our bread with you, so that when you go to be before the Lord, you will not go before Him empty-handed." And then maybe the fortunes rise and fall by the time the next feast comes along, and maybe Bill has to help Charlie, and Charlie has to help Bill, and it goes back and forth. But none of that can happen if we don't do a better job of creating a sense of community. And so we've done this thing. I call it Lone Ranger Christianity. We've kind of done this thing, and you even have people that are really involved in. You have people they'll be at every service in your church. They'll be there all the time. They're some of your most faithful people, but outside of the church, they don't have any other contact with the community of believers. And so it's just like, I love my church, but I'm lonely. Okay? Well, why are you lonely? You're lonely because when you're not in church, you detach yourself from community. And if everybody's doing that, it just doesn't work well. And as I said before, we've created an atmosphere in this country. There are thousands of churches across this country where you can walk in and you can worship and you can walk back out again, and you don't even have to speak to anybody. You don't have to be involved in anybody's life, and nobody has to be involved in your life, and you prefer it that way. Well, that works great unless you fall on hard times, because this is where community is supposed to come in. That community it's a safety net. That when we fall from the high wire, community is supposed to catch us, so that we can be responsible for each other. Let me ask you this: how can I love my brother? How can I pray for my brother if I don't know anything about him? If I'm not involved in his life in any way, if I've never even really had a deep conversation with him, how can I really effectively pray for him? Well, the answer is I can't. And I definitely can't provide for him in his time of need if I don't know him well enough to do so. So that's the little piece of word for today, chapter 23. Remember to subscribe. If you're seeing this for the first time, say, "Oh, wow, this is pretty cool." Remember to subscribe. Remember to comment. Remember to hit like. All of those things help in the big algorithm. And so we very much need that to grow this thing. Vita brevis gloria aeterna. Life is short. Glory is eternal. Have a wonderful day, and hopefully without so many trucks.